In honor of Earth Day being upon us once again, I thought we could take a look at an example of something that involves a natural resource that we all experience. Recycled storylines. Well, I actually meant rain, but yeah, that too. I'll go into more detail about how storylines are recycled from one Michael Landon show to another in a future video. But for now, let's talk about that time that Bonanza itself used the same plot twice and how it ended in two very different ways. I'll be brief in my summary of the episodes themselves because I will be doing a whole video on both when we get to that point in the series. Season 5 has Miracle from Heaven, where we meet a mountain man who claims that he can make it rain and end the drought that's devastating Nevada. Ben is skeptical and vocally so, causing the man, Tulsa Weems, to confront him. Turns out he has a wife and 2 children, one of whom is very sick, and he needs the money. It ends with Ben having stuck to his guns that a rainmaker, that is, a person who can make it rain with a mixture of smoke bombs and a chant or two, just doesn't exist. In fact, there's only one being who can make it rain, and Tulsa ain't it. In the end, though, the Lord brings rain, and most everyone seems to agree that it wasn't Tulsa's work. In Season 12's A Matter of Faith, we meet Jamie Hunter and returning sometime cast member Dusty when Virginia City is facing drought yet again. Dusty's latest get-rich scheme involves taking up with this kid whose father thought that he could make it rain. Jamie's father died sometime before the episode started, and Jamie is determined to prove that he really could do it by following his work right to the letter. Literally, because there's a manual on the subject. Ben is endeared by this child and helps him. The episode ends with a good old rainstorm. Jamie is convinced that he was the one to make that rainstorm happen, and Ben laments that he might be right. So, sharp-eared listeners might already have caught on to the fact that 1, these two have the same basic plot, and 2, they both end with Ben's opinion being radically different. The show seems to forget itself more than once and recycles plots, but those typically have a consistent result. This one, however, does not. Does this mean that we get a fresh twist on a plot that actually makes it okay to recycle it? I would argue no. I have one major problem with how this is set up, and it's actually not the fault of the first, but rather the latter. No, I don't just mean to dump on Jamie. I'll do that in its own video in the future, I promise. No, the problem is actually Pa Cartwright himself. Specifically, with how he seems to have 2 different opinions in these 2 episodes with seemingly no reason or explanation for the change. In the first one, he is adamant that there is no such thing as a human being who can make rain in a drought. He sticks to that, and this stance actually becomes the catalyst for Tulsa's life turning completely around. Tulsa is in denial and thinks of himself as more powerful than he really is, not just as a rainmaker, but as a man. By the end of it, Tulsa is praying for God to heal his child who's very sick. The show, like much of its time, takes a religious stance and holds it as a core value. Virginia City is a faithful community. The Virginia City folks believe in God. How you personally take this, we can all agree that it is the position the show takes. So to then drastically switch tactics in another episode seemingly to want to accomplish the same goals just doesn't make any sense. Ben takes pity on Jamie so much so that he takes him back to the ranch and keeps him from then on. That works fine, depending on how you feel about Jamie. The thing that doesn't work is Ben not, by the end of the episode, disavowing Jamie's claims. Let me be clear, this would be fine if Ben had not just done the same Dad Burn song and dance seasons earlier with a totally different stance, or if that stance had since shown signs of changing. Ben presumably still believes that God is the only one who can make it rain, right? So then why does he seem to take seriously the possibility that Jamie's little spellbook actually made it rain? There are 2 possibilities here. Either he just wants to let Jamie believe that he believes it, or he actually does believe it. I would argue that neither of those sounds like Ben Cartwright. He's not going to let someone go on believing a thing that he himself thinks is wrong, or he would have let Tulsa Weems believe it. Yes, Jamie is an orphan who could use some support. So then why not just support him the way that you did Tulsa? Sit him down, tell him his daddy wasn't a bad man, but that there's no way he was able to make it rain. Give him that same speech about God that you gave to Tulsa. Alternatively, the other option is that he does believe it. Why? Why the sudden change in all of your core beliefs? Show us how he came to that point. I'm sure the folks involved with the show just forgot about Tulsa by the time Jamie and Dusty rode, see what I did there, into town. In World, though, that doesn't work because Ben would not have forgotten. This is just one of the ways in which to demonstrate how recycling a storyline in the same show doesn't necessarily work. You back yourself into a corner where you have no choice but to make the ending exactly the same, and that just gets boring for those of us who were around to see the original. The flip side is what is done here, and you change your ending, making your characters look like they drank the amnesia water that every character drank in Westeros by the end of Game of Thrones. It wouldn't really fix it for me in a way that is satisfying as a viewer, but I'd feel the slightest bit better about all of this if someone had just mentioned Tulsa during A Matter of Faith. Ben could have taken Dusty aside and told him about that other time a Rainmaker came to town, and they could have proceeded to help this poor orphan boy with a clean slate, and starting with reality, the facts as they already established them prior. Do something. Just don't act like your belief in something that you fought against already to the point of shattering the hopes of every other person in Virginia City when Tulsa Weems came to town. In Miracle from Heaven, Ben tries to stop the other townsfolk from getting suckered into spending their money. A Matter of Faith has the same premise, but he doesn't work to save his friends from being frauded. Consistency is all I'm asking for at the end of this rant. I guess you also could have just chucked Jamie down a well as a sacrifice to the rain god. Whatever. Happy Earth Day!